Hey gang, welcome back. I'll Talk If You'll Listen, episode 50. Big 50. Really excited about it, and I couldn't get out of my own way. I couldn't get out of my own head. This whole week, this whole month, whatever you want to call it. And I'm sitting thinking to myself, what am I going to do for episode 50? What am I going to do for episode 50? And I mentioned this a while back. I think it was episode 47 or 46. And I said, you know what? Let's not make something bigger than it really is. You'll add to the pressure. You'll add to so much. And I don't want to give myself added stress. You know, I'm dealing with enough already. Don't want anything extra on top of the pot. So I sat back, I thought about it, and I said, hey, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I think I found something that's pretty cool that I can do, because at the end of the day, even though I can hang my hat on this show, and even though getting to one episode, let alone 50 of them, is a huge accomplishment, I will sit here and say that at the end of the day, it's all about you all. So it's not necessarily what do I want to do for myself. It's what do I want to do for you all. So I do have an announcement that I want to make in a little bit. I'm going to announce it towards the end of the show, after the interview. And hopefully if you stick around by that point or to that point, you'll hear a little bit of the announcement in its entirety. But yeah, I want to do something nice for y'all, for hanging out with me, for sticking around. Whether you started watching at episode 45, you started watching at episode 15, or you started from episode 1. And I want you to know I appreciate you. I do, because this ain't easy. It's easy, but it's not easy. It's easy to get everything going, you know, make sure you got everything set up, but it's not easy coming up with a topic every week. It's not easy trying to stay interesting. It's not easy reaching out and setting up interviews and trying to couple this in with the personal life and the work life and everything like that. And it can be really rewarding when you drop that episode, you listen to it, or you go to the catalog and you go, wow, 50 episodes. But there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that most people don't get to see. They don't get to hear about. They don't know. And I will say that this has been a heck of a journey. And I appreciate any and everyone who stuck around and wanted to stick around. So thank you. Okay, so enough with the sappy stuff, right? Enough with the mushy stuff. Let's get into the nitty gritty. So the topic this week, I will say, kind of just came to me. I was on Instagram, I was on Twitter, I was on Facebook, who knows where I was. And I was just scrolling and I just saw some different things that kind of like fueled this topic. And I'm not going to say what in particular, but I said, hey, you know what? I want to talk about drug addiction. I want to talk about substance abuse. This is something that impacts a lot of people, especially in the Black community and other minority communities. And it's something that in a really weird way can bring a lot of people together, right? In a really weird way, we can come together over pain, over trauma and things of that nature. And there are a lot of people who use drugs as an outlet for various different reasons. It could be peer pressure. It could be a hobby that went left. It could be, you know, just trauma, dealing with pain. And next thing you know, you find yourself dealing with the hard drugs too. I'm talking cocaine, PCP, meth, heroin, all these different things that you dive into as an outlet, as an escape. I want to talk a little bit about what's normal for some people. And I did pull up some statistics, and we'll talk about numbers and how it impacts different communities and what certain drugs are, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a bit, but I want to come from an anecdotal standpoint, if you all will indulge me for a second. I want to come from a non-factual, emotional standpoint, and I want to talk about my perception. So let's talk about drugs from a non-statistical standpoint. No numbers to back up what I'm about to say. We all know friends and family members who get into drugs for different reasons. And from my experience and from the experience of those around me, when it's inside the family, no one really wants to talk about it. No one really wants to confront it. No one really wants to have these difficult conversations. Everybody knows that one cousin, that one aunt, that one family member who is into drugs heavy. They're a fiend, so to speak. They are a crackhead, so to speak. They are a druggie, whatever term you want to use. They are hooked up on these drugs, and it takes control of their life. I have one family member in particular that every time I go down and visit, this family member is always asking me for money. You can always tell too, because it's never a large amount of money, large amounts of money. It's $10 here, $15 there, $5 here, obscure amounts of money. Hey, can I borrow $7? You're like, 7? These are things that you initially become curious about it, and then after a while you become hip to. But the thing I always found interesting is nobody talked about it. They always use vague terms like, oh, you know how he or she is, or you know what they're about to do, or you know what they're going to use that money for, or hey, we're not inviting so-and-so to this event. Whether it be something big, impactful like a wedding, or something small like a cookout or things like that. And this person starts to get a reputation inside the family. And everybody knows about this person. And no one wants to associate with this person. But no one talks about getting this person help. Right? No one talks about what we can do with this person. How can we check them into rehab, get them a substance abuse professional, a substance abuse program, alcohol anonymous programs, pamphlets, websites, courses. We don't talk about any of these things. It's just, oh, there goes so-and-so, stay away from them. And it kind of just makes me wonder why we take this like sheltered approach, right? Why do we don't want to say, hey, this person needs help? If someone has an eating disorder, if someone is dealing with depression, if someone is in between jobs, or if someone is homeless, they get a certain level of attention that drug addicts and substance abusers do not get for some reason. Like, hey, what is this? Where does this come from? What is this about? Right. And it gets to the point where, okay, we can get on a national platform. We can get on platforms like this. We can get on the news. We can get on whatever. And we can say drugs are bad. We can say, hey, we don't want kids. I don't know about y'all, but back in the day, and I forget what it stood for, but we had this program called DARE. It was an acronym, and I may be showing my age, but I know a lot of you watching, you remember DARE. It was DARE. And as a kid, I didn't really understand what it was. I was like, hey, I get to go to an assembly. I get to get out of class early. I get to skip out on some work. And we would go down to the auditorium, or in some cases, the gym or lunchroom. And we would have these presentations where, we had, hey, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Stay away from peer pressure. One big thing that they talked about was gateway drugs, right? And they talked about all these different things. And you get on this like faceless, anonymous platform where you don't have to look the abuser in the face. You don't have to look the addict in the face. And you say, hey, let's get these people help. Or, hey, if you know anyone struggling or suffering, let's go and do this thing, right? But we never really go to that person that we know, primarily in our family, that one family member, or in some cases, that one friend. We never go to them and say, hey, man, let me talk to you. Or, hey, sis, let's go over here real quick. Let's check this out. Or, hey, I was looking at this, and it's like we kind of shy away from that. And who knows what that is and why that is and what culture. And you can go into so many different things as to, especially within the Black community specifically, why we're so sheltered about our community and why we don't want other people hearing or knowing about it, and we want to kind of keep our dirt under the cover, right? Under the rug. We want to sweep it underneath the rug. And some of my experiences have been really normal. And I want to say how crazy it is that something this destructive is so normal in a child's eyes. So when I was younger, there was a friend of the family on my mom's side, my mother's side, and we called him Uncle so-and-so. We're just going to, we're not going to put the name out there. So Uncle so-and-so. Now, Uncle so-and-so wasn't actually an uncle. He was just a good friend of the family. And Uncle so-and-so was always involved in different things. And one time, late at night, fun fact for everyone out there, I don't know how to ride a bike. But I'm not the type of person where I'm going to wait for someone to show me, right? So what I did was this was summertime. We're talking like 3-4 in the morning. I got my bike and I went up to the local school. There's a big open schoolyard. And I'm on my bike and I'm trying to teach myself how to ride the bike. And as I'm walking away from the schoolyard and all the lights are out, I'm basically in the dark, right? I see Uncle so-and-so. Now, initially my face lights up like, wow, this is awesome. Here's Uncle so-and-so. He's here. He's going to, ask me, am I okay? Here I'm a, 13, 14-year-old kid or younger, maybe out and about. And all of a sudden, it's 3 a.m. Uncle so-and-so is coming to see if I'm okay. So Uncle so-and-so tried to take my bike. He tried to take my bike. He told me to give me the bike. He shouted at me, cursed at me, and I was scared. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I went back home and I kind of sat on it. I didn't say anything right away. I kind of was just like, you know what? I don't really want to, say anything. And then the next day, there was, someone else on the block who knew him. And I went and I was like, hey, and then eventually got back to my mom. I was like, hey, this, Uncle so-and-so tried to take my bike. What's going on? And then the only explanation I got was a really vague one. It was, oh, don't worry about it. He's okay. Or he wasn't in his right mind. Now, I know a lot of us, black, white, Puerto Rican, Asian, we can all relate to that phrase. He or she wasn't in his or her right mind. Now, what does that mean? They weren't in their right mind. Now, if you're an adult, you already know. Okay, he was high. He was high. He was looking for a fix. She was fiending. She was looking for a fix. But as a kid, he or she wasn't in her right mind. Doesn't know. You don't know what that means. I had another family member who, as I mentioned earlier, will always ask me for money and never got any deep, specific explanation for these things. It was always, don't worry about them, swept under the rug. And here's a question / thought that if you don't have the answer to, or if you don't think you have the answer to, I at least want you to think about it. And it's, why do we do that? Why do we not confront those that we claim we care about, that we love, that we respect, that we adore? Why do we not confront them? Why do we not seek help? Why do we not do that? It's something that I've been pondering a lot over the last few days as I led up to this topic, and it was crazy. Now, I wanted to get to some numbers, so I'm going to check some numbers out. Let's go ahead and bring up the numbers. I did a little bit of research. You're going to hear some clicking. If you're watching live, you know why. If you're listening, you will not hear it because I'll try my best to edit it out. But I wanted to get some numbers, right? So I wanted to go online. I wanted to take a look at some numbers. And one thing I wanted to take a look at is substance abuse within the black community specifically. So I decided to go ahead and pull up this article here that right now does not want to load. Here we go. Okay, there we go. All right, now this one was pretty interesting to me because this was pertaining to the black community in particular. The U.S. Bureau of the Census estimates that there are 44 million people of African origin living in the country, comprising 13.4% of the total population. African Americans are overrepresented among drug abusers in the United States, but they are also more likely to seek treatment from their drug addiction. Okay, and then it goes on to say, unfortunately, studies show that this population experiences less favorable outcomes upon the completion of substance abuse treatment. Here we will discuss the statistics of substance abuse among African Americans and explore treatment options and outcomes. So one area in particular that kind of jumped out to me was just some of these numbers compared to like the actual general population, right? So we're talking African American substance abusers compared to the general population. It goes on to say the rates of substance abuse among African Americans are similar to those of the general population, although there are some slight differences. Findings from the 2018 National Survey on Drug Use and Health include 6.9% of African Americans have a substance abuse disorder compared to a rate of 7.4% among the total population. 3.4% of African Americans have an illicit drug use disorder compared to a rate of 3% among the total population. Past month illicit drug use among African Americans, 13.7%, is more than Caucasians at 12%, and Hispanics at 9.7%. Past month marijuana use. Now this is big because a lot of people tend to separate marijuana from drugs, and although it technically is not a drug, you can still be addicted to it. You can still abuse the substance. So this one is something to think about. Past month marijuana use among African Americans, 12.2%, is higher than the general population at 10.1%. African Americans report lower lifetime use of cocaine, 8.5%, compared to Caucasians at 17.6% and Hispanics at 11.1%. And I will say that I don't know what it is, maybe a little further back in the 80s or, early 90s, or maybe in show business in Hollywood, cocaine is a little bit more prevalent. But I will say that like a lot of people that I know who have been on drugs or were on drugs, had experience with drugs, hardly ever cocaine. Not to say it never happens, but hardly ever cocaine. I will say that seems to be a little bit more present in the Caucasian and Hispanic community, and this 2018 survey seems to point that out. Alcohol use disorders are less common among African Americans at 4.5% than the total population at 5.4%. Binge drinking among African Americans is 23%. Wow. And it's slightly less common than in Hispanics at 24.6% and Caucasians at 25.7%. So it looks like binge drinking is much more of an issue than substance abuse or drugs or alcohol or marijuana. The rate of heavy drinking among African Americans, 4.3%, is much less than the general population at 6.1% and Caucasians at 7.2%. So there are a lot of studies out there that focus on African Americans in particular. And one in particular, according to the 2016 NSDUH, 20.4% or 6 million African Americans aged 18 and older reported using illicit drugs in the past year. This was higher than the national average at 18.2%. Now, you can get into a lot of different reasons as to why that is. You can have a lot of different theories as to what's going on there. Now, from my personal experience, I can say within the Black community, African American community, there aren't a lot of outlets, or more specifically, there aren't a lot of perceived outlets that a lot of young men and women can go to and express their stresses. I think there are a lot of things that young Black men and women and young men and women of other ethnic backgrounds experience that they get told that it's normal. It's normal to have a family member that behaves erratically, and it's normal to have other family members with mental disorders. It's normal for these certain things to happen, these traumatic experiences to happen in and outside of school, right? So I think what happens is they turn to drugs because they don't feel like they're a part of different things in school, at home, and they look to their friends, and their friends are the ones abusing substances. They're abusing drugs. They're doing the PCP. They're doing a wet. They're doing heroin. They're doing ecstasy. They're doing all these different things. And it doesn't help when you hear it in the music. And although I'm a firm believer that, parents need to take the responsibility, don't want to point to video games or movies or music. They're not the ones raising your kid. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help when you have these different media outlets and media platforms where you have people who are simply like, hey, this is the cool thing to do. So again, you'll get a lot of people going like, okay, well, this is the cool thing to do. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And you can see that it happens. And this article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, it did talk about that although African Americans are much more likely to go and seek help, usually as a result of their own, usually as a result of domestic situations. There are a lot of situations I know I personally have heard stories from people where they said, well, hey, if it wasn't for my wife, if it wasn't for my husband, if it wasn't for my kid, I wouldn't have gone and gotten help. That wouldn't have happened. And a story that I've shared in the past is my mother was on drugs, heavy, to the point where my two older brothers did not stay with her. She was not fit to raise them. But when I was born, something in my mom just clicked where she said, you know what, never again. And despite what I said earlier, ironically, my mom, she was a cocaine user. She was into some pretty heavy stuff, and she got off of that. And although there was some long-term effects, like you don't just get clean without any side effects, there were some long-term effects, and she did continue to abuse weed. She had me and, her daughter, and it kind of got to the point where like, okay, hey, my kids, that they are what's bringing me out of this thing, right? So the article does talk about that's a positive, but the problem is it also has the highest failure rate. The people of color, minorities, have the highest failure rate, the rate of failure. So they'll go and seek help, but then next thing you know, they're right back on the street. And it's really, really difficult to have that sustainability. And that's why having a good support network is really, 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 really important. So I do have a few comments on the Facebook stream right now, and I do want to go and read these comments and interact with some of my viewers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to interact with those guys, and I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, I'm back. Now, I encourage everybody to go and look up some statistics. A lot of people who are in a daily commute and they're driving, they may not have an opportunity to pull out their phone. But if you find yourself, 30 minutes before bed, or you find yourself with some downtime, you're at the doctor's office, you're at the mechanics, you're waiting in line at the grocery store, whatever the case may be, a simple Google search. Whenever I go and try to find some supporting data for the topics I'm going to discuss, I literally just put my whole question, no matter how long or specific it is. I just put the whole question into Google, and you'd be surprised as to what comes up. And I know we like to go to the big websites like the Pew Research Centers, but take a look at a lot of these .org websites. A lot of these .org and .gov, so-so in the .gov, but a lot of the .org websites are huge, and they provide a lot of cool information. In some cases, very comprehensive. So I encourage you to go and look that up. Aside from the statistics, I think everybody listening, in your heart, either from your own personal experience or through the experience of others, that this is something that is very, very common. And unfortunately, people can get into some really sticky situations when it comes to drugs. Now, a lot of people feel a certain way about weed, especially now. A lot of people feel a way about weed compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago, because our stance on weed now in a lot of different areas, it's being used for medicinal purposes. It's being used for recreational purposes. And a lot of states are legalizing it. And a lot of police departments across the country have decriminalized it in a lot of different cases and occasions and scenarios. However, one thing that I will say, not only based on my personal experience, but also based on the experience from the person that I interviewed that you'll hear later on in the show, is weed has been and will always be a gateway drug. And I think, I should probably get a shirt that says there are two types of people, because I feel like I'm starting to say it every episode. But just for the sake of consistency, there are two types of people. You're going to get that person who loves and enjoys weed so much and they use it responsibly, or maybe they don't, and they never done anything hardcore as a result. And they'll hear what I'm about to say and they'll go, you know what? That's not true because I didn't do it. And we all know people like that, where we're like, hey, this didn't happen to me, so it can't possibly be true. And then you got that second type of person who can go and think and say, you know what? That was me, or that was my friend, or that was my family member, or I did hear about this on that show or that podcast that one time. And weed will always be a gateway drug. Whether you want to hear that or not, it will always be a gateway drug, both intentionally and unintentionally. Now, intentionally is pretty obvious, right? You have that one friend who that marijuana high just isn't enough for them. They need the next level. They need a few more notches, so to speak. So what'll happen is they'll go and find something to mix it with, or the popular term is lace it with. And they intentionally go and seek that out, that thrill, that extra kick, that extra high, right? It's almost kind of like that high you get from snowboarding or skiing or surfing for the first time. You're like, you know what? What's next? Can I go rock climbing? Can I go mountain climbing? Can I go dirt biking? Can I go skydiving to get that next level of high, right? It's the same thing for people who abuse drugs and other substances. And then we have the unintentional gateways, right? And you might be thinking, hey, what's an unintentional gateway? I know I personally have witnessed this. And I know a lot of you listening and watching right now, I'm sure you've had an experience where if you smoke weed or you've been around people who smoke weed, you're in the some people call them sessions. We're in this big old circle and you're passing the weed around. It could just be in a car. It could be at a party. It could be at a pregame. And maybe you're around some people that you're not that familiar with. And one person goes, hey man, try this out. Or maybe you're around a bunch of people who you don't know and someone put something in the weed because that's the way they have it. That's the way their friends have it. That's the way it's done in their circle. And at this point, you're just collateral damage. You're a part of their gang now. You're a part of their clique now, even though this is only a temporary situation. And then you get the weed, you get the joint, you get the spliff, whatever you call it, and you smoke it, you puff it. And next thing you know, your high is a little bit different than before. And that opens it up to so many other different things. And that's why any abuse is dangerous because it opens the door, Pandora's box, so to speak, to the next level. Now, one of these drugs is wet. Another is heroin. And I wanted to talk about PCP. Now, me personally, I'm a big fan of educating myself if it's a situation where I don't know what this is. You hear these terms and these statements and these substances all the time, and you kind of just expected to know what they are. Or maybe it doesn't really impact you, so you don't really care. So you go, you know what? I'm just going to go and whatever, right? So I decided to go look it up, and I decided to do a little bit more research on what PCP was, and I would like to share it with everybody. If you don't know what PCP is, or even if you do know what it is, this is what it is. And the reason that this article really jumped out at me is because it talks about some of the observations and it talks about some of the side effects of PCP. So here we go. PCP. What happens when someone takes PCP? So PCP desired effects. When a person ingests PCP, they expect to feel a pleasant high and hallucinate. Initially, the individual might feel happy, and perception changes may not be extreme hallucinations, but changes to light, color, sound, and touch. The individual may experience changes in time, either slowing down or speeding up, or they can feel out of or above their bodies. Any effects of PCP begin within 30 to 60 minutes after it has been ingested orally, or a few minutes if smoked or injected. Depending on the size and potency of the dose, effects can last for 46 hours or as long as 24 hours. Now, I did not know that before I read this article. Can you imagine a 24-hour high? And not necessarily, like this article pointed out, a pleasant high, but we're talking like an intense, potent, lucid high for 24 hours a day. You could go to sleep and wake up and still be high. That's unreal to me. The article goes on to say, mental health problems due to PCP drug. Because PCP causes hallucinations, for many people, this can become dangerous. Anxiety, delirium, paranoia, and an inability to distinguish reality from fantasy are hallmark symptoms of PCP intoxication. The individual could become aggressive because of their paranoia or panic attacks and lash out at themselves or the people around them. They could believe things that are not true, called delusions. These could be delusions of grandeur, including the ability to fly, or paranoid delusions, including the sensation that everyone is trying to harm them. They could experience amnesia or memory loss. Now that's crazy. Could you imagine being high and coming down from it and not remembering why you felt that way? That's some next level stuff. Now here's where it gets a little bit juicy. Here are some of the outward signs of PCP intoxication. If a person is intoxicated after ingesting PCP, they may display symptoms like a blank stare, rapid involuntary eye movements, typically side to side, changes to stride or gait, drooling, loss of balance, catatonic trance, twitches, shudders, or random uncontrolled movements, physical exertion without perception of pain or muscle strain, sweating or flushing due to increased body temperature. Here are some of the side effects experienced by someone who's high on PCP. A person who is intoxicated on PCP may experience several side effects, which can be alarming or physically dangerous. These include raised blood pressure, rapid or irregular heart rate, raised body temperature, increased respiration or gasping of air, nausea and vomiting, blurred vision, dizziness, confusion, seizures, and a coma. That's pretty intense. Now, this was my favorite part because first it broke down PCP, right? First it broke down kind of like from a sense of like, hey, what to expect when you see someone who does it or if you use it yourself, right? Now, this breaks it down as what it is. And I apologize if I tried to practice the pronunciation of this like offline before I got to this, and we'll see if it's stuck or not. So what is PCP? The drug PCP, which stands for phencyclidine, was developed in the 1950s to be an intravenous anesthetic drug, but the side effects patients experience after using the substance led to the discontinuation of its use for medical purposes. However, it has been introduced as an illicit hallucinogen. It is sometimes called angel dust, embalming fluid, or rocket fuel. As a non-medical dangerous drug, PCP is found in powdered form, and it is typically smoked, although it can be mixed with water and injected, drank, or eaten. It is also sometimes found in a pill or gel capsule. As a hallucinogen, PCP affects people very differently. In the best potential circumstances, the person who takes PCP receives a sense of euphoria and some perceptual changes. Unfortunately, this drug is very dangerous and can cause serious mental and physical side effects. According to the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, in 2010, there were 53,542 emergency room visits associated with PCP abuse. And we're talking a decade ago. This drug is primarily ingested by teenagers and young adults, which is such a shame, which can lead to long-term health problems and addiction to short-term side effects. Withdrawal symptoms of PCP. PCP is extremely addictive, so people who abuse this drug do experience withdrawal symptoms after the dose wears off. Some of these symptoms include memory loss or amnesia, we talked about that, depression and anxiety, drug craving, fatigue or increased need for sleep, increased appetite. And finally, we're going to talk about some of the long-term effects of abusing PCP. If a person abuses PCP regularly, they will experience serious physical and mental side effects. They could suffer psychosis during one episode of intoxication, and that could become permanent. This and other serious mental health problems can be triggered during an episode called a run, in which a person takes PCP over 2 to 3 days and does not sleep or eat. The individual can experience flashbacks to hallucinations they had while high on PCP. That's crazy. So you can not even be high and have a flashback of being high. They could develop persistent speech pathologies, including stuttering or an inability to find words or articulate thoughts, persistent disordered thoughts, and in some cases, some rare cases, the person may lose the ability to speak at all. Serious anxiety and depression are common among people who chronically abuse PCP. These mental health issues could be accompanied by social isolation and suicidal thoughts. Organ damage to the liver, kidneys, and lungs can also occur. So there you have it. That's pretty much PCP in a nutshell. And I wanted to look that up and read about it and get a better understanding of it, because it's definitely something that I know people who have struggled with. And my guest later on, you'll hear a little bit from, talks a little bit about PCP. And that's a hell of a drug, y'all. That's not something that I think people take lightly. But I think, like most addicts or anyone using or abusing, when you're in a moment, you're just looking for whatever feels good, right? You're just looking for whatever kick you can get. You're just looking for whatever outlet that you can get that will make you feel good. And you're not really thinking about it. Under most circumstances, you don't really know what it is. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and she was like, hey, that's embalming fluid. Like, why would somebody want to put that in their bodies? And I responded with, well, hey, the person might not even know what it is. You could get some weed laced with PCP, and next thing you know, you're hooked to it. You like it. Someone could offer it to you, and you're looking to get that next level of high, and you get it, and you're hooked. And all you know is those 3 letters, PCP. You have no idea what it is, what it's used for, and why it got discontinued. It's just crazy what we decide to put in our bodies to make ourselves feel good. It's amazing what we decide to put on our bodies to make ourselves feel good. And I think that's the next level. Now, before I get to this interview, I did want to take a small break and check up on everybody's watching, both either on the Periscope or on the Facebook app, and I'll be back in just a moment. Hey everybody, I'm back. I appreciate you sticking around. Had to pay some bills, but more importantly, say hello to everybody watching. So, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, I try to get people who lived a certain life, had a certain experience, and I try to bring their experience to the show as best I can. Whether that be someone who had close ties to it, or whether it be someone who lived it themselves. So this time around, I did reach out. Now, I don't know this person personally. This person coming up, his name is Jason. I don't know Jason personally. Jason is a friend of a family member. And Jason heard what I was doing. He heard about the show. He was asked that he want to come on and share his experience. And I was really appreciative. Now, the cool thing about this interview is it kind of gives you a little insight into an addict's mind. Now, Jason has since cleaned up his act and he's doing very well for himself. Shout out to Jason. And you'll hear a little bit about some of what he's involved in. But I wanted to get inside the mind of an addict, someone who abused different substances, and what was it like in different phases of their addiction and what brought them out of it. And I'm hoping my primary goal here is not necessarily just to share Jason's story, but I don't know who's out there listening. I have friends and family members who listen and I talk to them every day. But when I get, dozens of downloads in a week, I'm sure that's more than people that I know personally. So there could be someone out there listening who maybe is struggling with addiction. My goal is to give you some insight and give you an experience outside of your own. And I just want you to listen and hear Jason's thoughts, emotion, and his life experiences. And hopefully I can touch you in a way that maybe your friends or family members can't or haven't. So without further ado, here's Jason. Here's his experience with substance abuse. And hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another week, another episode. And as always, I try my best to have a really great topic. And this time around, I think I have a good treat for you all. I have a friend of a friend, actually a friend of a family member by the name of Jason, who's going to talk about today's topic. Jason, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode.
Hey, Tim, no problem. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited, and I'm very curious, and I can't wait to dive into the discussion so that way we can just enlighten the world. I like to enlighten my audience, and I like to give my audience an experience that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise experienced if not for the show. So this time around, I'd like to talk about substance abuse. I like to talk about being an addict and some of the things that go through a person's mind when they go through those experiences that maybe from the outside looking in, people only really get the experience when watching TV or listening to music, don't have that authentic, raw experience. So I would like to get your help in expressing that for the people. So before we dive into the interview, what were some of the substances that you had a challenge with throughout your life experience?
Yeah, so I guess obviously the obvious, marijuana and alcohol. And then my first, what I call my first hardcore substance was PCP, which we call wet, sherm sticks, dippers. That's what they're called in the Philadelphia, Camden area. And then I actually, in my later years, I guess mid-20s, cocaine. So that was pretty much, my thing was, it began and ended with PCP. In the midst of that, it was, like I said, cocaine and also at one point, Xanaxes and Percocets as well. But for somebody like me, short of putting a needle in my arm, everything else was a go. And even when it came to heroin, I had even, 3 times in my life I had snorted heroin. I just wasn't a big fan of it. So, yeah, my drugs of choice, I would say, is my first drug of choice is PCP, and the secondary drug of choice would be cocaine.
Now, those are pretty, as you mentioned, hardcore drugs, and a lot of people usually don't go straight to those. They usually have what the community likes to call a gateway drug, and I'm sure you've heard that term and used that term a ton in your life. And I want to talk a little bit about your whole experience in different phases, and I want to focus on the beginning. So what was your experience that kind of led you to thinking, hey, this is the outlet I need? This is what I need to kind of feel good about myself, feel good about my situation. What kind of got you to that point?
Well, I guess growing up, I don't come from the richest family. I don't come from the poorest family. But I do come from, we did struggle growing up. I grew up right on the borderline of East Camden and Pennsauken. So like my house was technically Pennsauken, 3 houses down the street. My neighbor was East Camden. So we grew up in a, little underprivileged neighborhood. So I guess kind of growing up wanting Jordans, and like my first pair of Jordans I bought for myself, like when I was like 16 years old. I could never get them as a kid. And just different things of that nature. A lot of pain as a child. My father, he's a great man now. He's right where he needs to be now. But, for a while it was, he always lived with us, but my mother was raising me and my sister for the most part. And then some other things that happened to me, that just shouldn't happen to little children, if you know where I'm going with that. So I guess I guess different things. It's a tough question. I really don't know what really led me to do it because I didn't come from a house where I watched my mother or my father getting high every day or getting drunk every night. I didn't come from a broken home. I didn't come from that. Now, if you go to an extension of my family, like my uncles a lot of my uncles got high. And when I say a lot of my uncles, I really only have one uncle by blood. I got a couple by marriage, but I had a lot of my mom and dad's cousins who I would call uncle. Like, we kind of had that kind of family where we grew up calling them uncle and aunt, but they were really my mother and my father's cousins. So, my grandfather was an alcoholic, a bad alcoholic. So I guess, I don't go by your cliche views of, alcoholism, substance abuse, because at the end of the day, everybody has. I mean, if it was hereditary, everybody's got it. Because I'm sure you, Tim, you have some family members who were one or the other, and everybody does. I mean, not everybody might not have a aunt or uncle standing on the corner smoking crack, but we all have a family member who might even drink every night. Like, they're reliant on them 3 or 4 glasses of wine every night. They're reliant on them 3 or 4 beers every night, and they need it. They might not be waking up in the morning and cracking a beer open to get out of bed, but by the time they get home from work, they need that beer. They need that drink. It's an everyday routine. So if you take that out of their life for a day or two, I'll show you how they get antsy and get on edge, and that's where, this addiction doesn't discriminate. So I guess it was just a pain, and I felt as though at that point in my life, I felt like I fit in with something. I fit in with people smoking pot and drinking, and I just grew up with, I was hanging out with the guys that were a couple years older than me. So, I was like 13 and they were 16, and I, started smoking cigarettes and smoking weed, and I didn't even really like drinking I never really liked drinking until I was like, I had my acquired taste for it, but I was always a pot smoker. And, and then I guess at about 16 years old, the PCP, I tried it, and actually the first time I ever smoked it, I didn't even get high. So go figure that I guess 15 years old, tried it, and by the time I was 16, I loved it, pretty much an everyday thing, but it wasn't out of hand at that point. It was for fun. I used to love going to Philly to get it. If we're going to get into all of that, but by the time I was in my 20s, it was bad. It had gotten pretty out of control. It was just a pill here and there, preferably a Xanax here and there, mixed with some wet and like a beer. And that's where the alcohol I started to acquire that taste for alcohol, I guess late teens, early 20s, because it mixed well with a Xanax and some wet.
Well, that's a heck of an experience, and one thing or more than one thing, but the two things that I'd say really stood out that you talked about is wanting to fit in and family members in general. Because I can tell you from my experience growing up, I was around a lot of guys who, in some cases girls, but when you're younger, you generally hang out with people who look and sound like you. So I hung out with a lot of my guy friends, and a lot of them smoked cigarettes or drank or, were doing drugs or smoked weed or anything like that to fit in, exactly like you said, to fit in. That was kind of like a part of their thing. They wanted to either look cool or they wanted to be a part of a crowd, or they knew if they went home, they wasn't going back to anything. They really couldn't relate to their family, and their family were their friends. And in order to be accepted, they had to do what their friends did, even if that was some negative or toxic things. And it kind of makes me think about some of the things that my friends would say to themselves and to other people around them to kind of like rationalize their behavior. And I want to ask you that. What were some of the things that you told yourself or you told other people to rationalize what you were doing, that it was okay, it wasn't a big deal, or did you know from the jump, like, hey, this is horrible, I shouldn't really be doing this, but it makes me feel good? So, what was your mindset at around that time?
I mean, I really didn't. I didn't think it was horrible. I thought that it was just what teenagers did. Like, I thought mom and dad were tripping. I thought, it was never going to be an issue where, like, because I was being told, by 15 years old, I was being told by the courts and different people who they put in my life, social workers and different people like that, were, this is where it leads to. And I mean, you couldn't tell me nothing. I was like, you're crazy. I'm not. At the time, I don't even use the word anymore, but I was like, I'm not a fiend. I'm not gonna, go ahead with that. Like, that's that guy on the corner. That's not gonna be me. Like,
right, you were basically saying, I'm different. So, like, I'm the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I thought, like, I said, like, nah, I'll never do that, like, and sure enough, they were right. So I would just tell myself it was just like, it was a way to relax, and, it was something to escape, everything. I mean, things that I didn't have, things that I wanted, things that, people don't understand me like that, and I felt like, the people that I smoked marijuana with at the time, they understood me, and we all had that in common. I was one of them who smoked weed and waited an hour before I went home because I didn't, I had eye drops. I had Visine in my pocket all the time. Like, even though my mom and dad knew, but I just was like, not gonna blatantly just come home like that. I mean, I guess that's how I rationalized it. And I think at the time, I really honestly I didn't think I was really, to me, I wasn't rationalizing. You were wrong and you didn't know what you were talking about, and I had it under control. Now, looking back now, I know I didn't have it under control because I was cutting classes. I mean, I wasn't even going to school. I was being put on non-credit status. I was in 9th grade twice. I was in 10th grade twice. I was, my first 10th grade year, I was sent to Jamesburg. I was taken out of school because I was put away. I was, I was locked up. I was put in a New Jersey training school for boys. And these were the people who were telling me, like I said, the social workers, the COs, the judges, probation officers, they were all the ones telling me, like, where this leads to. And I was like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. To me, it was, you're being too strict on me. You're always, you guys are always on me. Like, just let me live. Like, I'm not even doing nothing. Like, now I know.
I mean, that's a heck of an experience for anyone to go through. And I'm sure you had people around you who maybe felt differently than you. And like you said, from your perspective, you're like, oh, you're being too strict. You're too hard on me. Don't worry, I'm special. You don't have to worry about me. I won't let this thing control my life. And you have these friends and family members and people who care about you around you trying to reason with you. Did you notice a point where your behavior towards your friends and family members started to change? Or was it kind of all one big blend, one big mirage for you?
Yeah, I would say it was one big mirage for me. I guess, like, so I guess my behavior towards my family changed as a teenager, but not, like, really so much with my friends, because at that point, all my friends were doing the same thing. So my behavior, now if you fast forward to like mid-20s to the later 20s, my behavior towards my friends changed because a lot of my real friends were no longer talking to me. There was weddings that I was not invited to and uninvited to because they didn't know what I was going to say. They didn't know what I was going to do. But as a teenager, yeah, I mean, my, some of my family members, and then I'd say not an even split, but I mean, some of my family members were like, some of my uncles were like, hey, like, well, here, you can come over here, like, cause they did the same thing. And, that was another part of my big influence. I had an uncle that, went away and did, I don't know, 9 years or 11 years. He did some he was indicted on federal charges for, I don't even know exactly what the charges were, but, distribution of cocaine. You know, he had went away and he did what he did, and I don't even know much about it because he doesn't talk much about it, but it was something that it influenced me, you know, because that's really how I got into the hardcore drugs. I was selling it, and it was just one time I came home and I don't know, like 24 years old, I was curious. A couple bags of coke left over, like, that I didn't sell. And, you know, I brought them home, and plan was to come back the next morning and finish off what I had left. And it didn't go like that. I tried it because I was curious, like, why did they beg? Why did they ask for, like, why did they ask to get, like, let me get that for $8. Like, why are they begging me with quarters and stuff? And I tried it, and I liked it. And at that point, I didn't even try it. I didn't even start doing it daily. It was just like, okay, it was cool. I liked it, whatever. But little by little, I found out other friends were doing the same thing without telling people, because at that, you know, people were embarrassed. I guess it was like, I knew at that point with cocaine, I was like, for some reason, people didn't look at smoking wet as like a fiend. Like, they looked at people who do coke and heroin as a fiend. And it was funny how them stereotypes get twisted around, you know, like, it was just it was kind of like wet was okay, but like cocaine and heroin weren't. So, but I held my composure I held my composure as far as like the way I dressed. For the most part, I kept myself dressed nice, always had a fly outfit on, new sneakers on. I had that problem underneath them sunglasses. You wouldn't know that my eyes are spinning back in my head, you know?
Right. Just keeping up in the appearances and in different phases. You can have that. You know, we talked a little bit about the beginning. We talked a little bit about the during, the whole experience, and now like the transition towards like the aftermath where you started to come out of the addiction and things of that nature. When you are around loved ones and you're dealing with different things, whether it be addiction, whether it be other sort of substance abuses, whether, you know, you're addicted to a certain lifestyle or sex, or even if you're depressed, you have so many people around you who try to pull you out of that, and it oftentimes doesn't work. What was it that finally got you away from that lifestyle, that finally got you away from substance abuse, and why did it work at that time and not previous to that?
Well, Tim, you know, I mean, first thing I got to say is, I mean, it's the only thing that got me away was my personal Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Like, you know, that's who got me. That's what did it for me. And it's not that he couldn't do it 10 years prior, 20 years prior. It's, you know, we have free will. And I believe that he put me through all these obstacles and all of these tests, and he did that to make me who I am today. But to get more specific with how, like, what did he do it through? He did it through, I guess I have to say, like, my wife. You know, I was just married last Sunday, just married a week ago, and I lost her, and we were together for a couple of years, and she knew what I was into when she got with me. She had been my best friend since I was like, well, we were friends since we were 13. I'd say we were really good friends, and one of my best friends since like 15, 16 years old. And so she knew, obviously, the whole time. She had watched me. She had come to visit me when I was in different places. So it wasn't a surprise to her. I think that when we got together, she didn't realize that the extent of my problem was still present. She maybe thought like, okay, he doesn't do that stuff no more like that. And I was kind of hiding it. And, you know, after so many relapses, well, what you call relapses, because they weren't really relapses because I never stopped smoking weed or drinking to call it a relapse. But to me, it was a relapse because I would be on what I call the marijuana maintenance plan. Where I'm just smoking weed and I'm okay. I told you I got this. I told you I'm not an addict, you know, so, and she really didn't have a problem with that when I was smoking weed. But for me, she didn't realize that that's always going to eventually lead back to what I really want, which was wet or cocaine. So I'd say over over the first, I guess, 4 years together, 3.5 years together, I probably had like 3 or 4 different times that either she found out I was using other things, or like 2 of the times it was just guilt. I told her I was. And I guess that 4th time or whatever it would have been, we were engaged in 2016, and it was the day before Father's Day, and she had sent me a text. I was over at my friend's house, and she was like, "Look, don't come home. You know, you chose drugs over me and Amaya for the last time. That's my daughter." You know, at first I thought she's just bugging out. Like, I'll give her a day or two. And after like a week, she wasn't letting me back, and we were renting an apartment from her dad. Yeah, we were renting an apartment. Like, it was our apartment, but we were renting it. It was our house. We were renting from her, but we were renting from her father. So I'm the one who has to go. So I went on a long run, and I lost. It was my last run. It was the last time, summer of 2016. I blew thousands and thousands of dollars, double digit thousands of dollars down payment for a house, which was all my money. I was never like a bum dude who took his girl's money. Like, it was my money. But I blew it all in 7 weeks. I blew $16,000. And I always tell people it was one hell of a ride. One hell of a ride. But at the end of them 7 weeks, I found myself dead. Like, literally. Without life on Broadway, downtown Camden. The EMTs found me without a pulse, without a heartbeat, and
wow.
They told me. They said if we would have got there a couple minutes later, you might not have been here. I woke up in Cooper Hospital, like, chained to the handcuffed to the thing, like, with Metro Police sitting there. And I'm just like, am I being detained? They're like, no, let me the heck out of here. So after that, the next day I had went to rehab, July 24th, 2016. That's my clean date. I went to rehab, and, I was still out of it. I was in a foggy mode for like 2 weeks, and I went away for 2.5 weeks. That's all I could really get through my funding that I had at the time. And my sister is the one who actually informed me that, do you know you died? Do you know you weren't? I'm like, what are you talking about? So, like, I went back to Cooper Hospital looking for the medical records, and sure enough, in the paramedics' notes, it was, we found Mr. Zimmerlong, whatever it said, without a pulse, and they had to, we had to resuscitate me. And, so I guess all of that kind of played a part in me getting sober, and I realized that, like, I'm about to really you could throw all the money away. You could throw all the clothes away. You could throw the cars away, because I threw all of them things away in one way or another. You could throw the jewelry away. But when you really love someone and you realize that you were about to, like, lose them forever, especially in my case, where this was not just a girl, like, she was my best friend. Like, I was getting ready to lose a good friend too. And I did lose her for 2 years. She didn't speak to me. But I was determined. I just said, I want to do my thing regardless. I took myself, got home, realized after 3 weeks being home out of a local rehab here in New Jersey, realized I wasn't ready because I wanted to smoke weed again. Like, that was it. I didn't want to do any other hardcore drugs, but that's when I knew I wanted to stay sober, because instead of smoking weed that night, I called my counselor back and said, hey, what about these places in Florida you told me about? I thought I was ready to come home, but I'm not, like, because I want to get high. Like, and I didn't. I fought it all night, and I didn't get high. And within 4 or 5 days later, I was on a one-way flight down to Fort Lauderdale, and I went down to something called a sober living. My first time doing sober living, which is different than rehab. A lot of people who don't know, they get them confused. They just think that, oh, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. So, and, after like 10 or 12 rehabs, I'm not going to say they didn't work, because they all planted seeds in me. But I went to one sober living, and I've been sober ever since. And 2 weeks ago, I just celebrated 4 years sober. And that's kind of what, that's what did it for me was I just surrendered. And you're not, anybody out there struggling, you have to want it. Like you can't, anybody, any mom listening, any brother or sister listening of an addict or somebody in active addiction, there's nothing you can do until they're ready to do it. Like all you can do is be there and support them, but know that line between tough love and, because that's what happened with me. I started running out of that. My mom wasn't going to no longer let me come back and sleep at home. She was like, no, the door's locked. Like you. So when everything was stripped from me, I was okay until everything I had was stripped, and I surrendered. And now, just for some inspiration, just 4 years sober, I'm married. I have a rewarding career. Have a nice car. I'm a homeowner now for almost 2 years. Got my little investments going on, trying to, and I'm working on opening up my first sober living. So it's, life is amazing. God is great. All glory be to him. This is not me. He's just using me to show his power.
That's huge, Jason. And I want to say that the whole process, any process that we go through, can be very transformative. And I think that's a great way to describe your experience. It was very transformative. And it just goes to show you everyone's dealing with their own internal war. I've had conversations with friends and even my own girlfriend where I tell her, like, hey, just because your struggle, your pain isn't quite like someone else's doesn't mean that it's not painful, that it's not traumatic. And we're all going through our own demons and our own trauma. And I think that you are, or at least will be, a huge inspiration to a lot of people who can hear a little bit about your journey and just to see the beginning, middle, and end. Who knows where to end? This isn't the end. But to say that where you are right now is leaps and bounds further than where you were, at 16, 17, 18 years old. So I like to take the opportunity to say thank you. Hopefully everyone out there listening can take something from your experience and put it in them and make it a little bit better. And there may be people who are struggling with addiction, and to hear you say, like, hey, you got to want it for yourself. I think that's really great advice. So before I let you go, Jason, I do want to sit here and give you an opportunity to let everyone know what you got going on, or if there's anything that you want to let the people listening know about.
Tim, I'd like to thank you too for having me. It's my first podcast, or obviously I've never been on TV either, so it's my first. I've given a couple. I've given my story to a couple schools in the past and things of that nature. But so thank you. And to anybody, I'm now in the field. I'm in the substance abuse field. I'm actually getting ready after COVID. Due to COVID, I've been held back a little bit from taking my state exam for my CADC, my Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor certification. I'm about 19 credits away from my first college degree, and so really, I'm just waiting to take the exam where I could be a counselor, which I already was a counselor for 2 years. I was a counselor intern, but I full caseload. I kind of took a step back with that. I'm a case manager now for a facility in South Jersey. So I don't know about the whole Instagram, like, at whatever, but I'll just spell my name out. It's Jason, spelled traditionally Jason, and my last name is Zimolong. Z as in zebra, I-M as in Mary, O-L, O-N as in Nancy, G as in God. So Jason Zimolong. If you're not gonna, I don't think there's two of us, so not with a name like that. You type me in, look me up on Instagram, hit me on the direct messenger, whether I know you or not. I can assure you that it's a confidential, it's everything's confidential. If you're struggling, I mean, if I can help you get into rehab, outpatient, get you into a sober living, I'm more than willing to help you out. But you know, again, it's about taking that first step and admitting that you're powerless over this. Like it really is. I was one of them ones who didn't believe it was a disease. I didn't believe that. And when I say I didn't believe it's a disease, I'm implying that I do believe that now. And I have to just make sure that it's a different type of disease than like a child with cancer, because that's what I always used to say was, no, kids born with cancer, that's a disease. They didn't ask for it. Well, like a lot of addicts didn't ask for it either, because like I said, I started off like it was fun. Like I was 13 years old. I was a broken 13-year-old who was abused as a child and went from this and that as a child, and I was lost. And I just did what I thought was cool, but it turns into an addiction where it's a disease. It was something that controlled my mind. So yeah, anybody, whether you got medical benefits or not, there's like really always a way to get somebody some kind of help, whether it's a scholarship, whether you have to go through a state-funded program. At the end of the day, if you want to get right, it doesn't matter if you have benefits or not. It doesn't matter if you're in a multi-million-dollar rehab center or you're in a $50 rehab center. Like, you know, when I got my life together, nothing mattered. I just knew I was going to do it, and playtime was over. God first, family second, everything else will fall in its place.
That's huge, Jason. I like that, man. Well, again, thank you so much for being a part of the show and sharing your experience, and hopefully we can do it sometime in the future. I really appreciate you.
Definitely. Thank you, Tim.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I really appreciate you sticking around for that interview. It was really cool, and it was nice to hear Jason's side of things. Now, like Jason mentioned in the interview, he's been through it, and he's currently in the substance abuse professional field right now. So he may be able to give you a little bit more insight, a little bit more information regarding his story. And if you're struggling with addiction, he could at least turn on the right, lights for you that can help you get to where you need to be, or at least where you want to be. The thing that really stood out to me out of this whole interview was Jason saying that you have to want it for yourself. And that's so powerful because you can apply that to anything, whether it be entrepreneurship, whether it be a hobby, whether it be some sort of goal or passion in your life. Why would it not also include addiction? So yeah, you got to want it for yourself. You got to want to come out of it on your own. And there's no type of help that can beat you helping yourself. Now, we all need help. No great deed was ever done alone. However, there's no help quite like the help you can give yourself. So I encourage everyone to reach out to Jason if you find it relevant to your life. Like Jason mentioned in the interview, and I do apologize. These interviews are done over the phone, so I am at the mercy of the phone connection here. So I do apologize if the interview was a bit muffled, but that's Jason, Jason Zimolong, Z for Zulu, IMOLONG on Instagram. Go check him out, send him a message, tell him thank you, ask him more about his experience. He'd be happy to share. He's a really nice guy. Now, like he mentioned, he did just get married. We're a week into his marriage right now. So just bear with him as he adjusts to a new lifestyle. Now, I'm going to take one more break, and then I'm going to come back with that announcement I talked about at the top of the show, and then I'll let you all go. I'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. So here's what I'm going to do for you all sticking around for 50 episodes. Now, again, I couldn't be here without you all, and I've said it on multiple occasions. I'm humbled, appreciative, and grateful for one listener. So when I have tons of downloads on some of your favorite episodes, I really wanted to do something special for you all. And I wanted to let you all know that, hey, we're in this together. So in celebration of episode 50, I'm going to give away 2 $25 gift cards. And it's going to be a drawing. You don't have to buy in. You don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to send me anything for Cash App. You don't have to be a patron. Although I'd appreciate you being a patron. All you have to do is reach out to me on what your favorite episode is. That's all you got to do. It could be this one. It could be episode 4. It could be episode 17. It could be episode 38. Tell me what your favorite episode is. You get entered into the drawing. Now, how can you get in touch with me? So many different ways. I put it in the description of every show, but for those of you who are new around here, if you're new on the block, you can email me at I'llTalkIfYou'llListen@hotmail.com. You can hit me up on Twitter, whether you can just mention me. You can just use the hashtag, ITIYL or I'll Talk If You'll Listen. You can DM me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at Tim_ITIYL and message me. Follow me, message me and say, hey, this is what my favorite episode was. And I'm also available if you are friends with me on Facebook. Do the same thing. Message me right on my wall. Tag me in a post. If you got my number, text me. There are so many different ways you can get in touch with me. And I'm not going to regulate how you have to do that. So 2 $25 gift cards. They'll be to Amazon. So you can get whatever you want. Whether that be a subscription, whether that be something for the house, whether it be a nice gift for a friend or family member or a partner or spouse. $25 gift card, 2 of them. So 2 chances to win. So some of my favorite episodes. I wanted to pull this up. Let's check this out. Let's bring up Spreaker. Spreaker, for those of you who don't know, is my podcast host. That's SPREAKER. And Spreaker, you signed me out. Let's sign back in. And what I want to do is I want to go to my episodes. And I want to briefly, I'm not going to hold you up for too long. I want to go through every episode and see which one was my favorite. So let's go here. So these are a little out of order here. So I'll try my best to kind of keep them in the same order. So we had episode 1, which was, I don't even have it published on Spotify and iHeartRadio and Apple and Google and all that. You can't even go and listen to it on those platforms. You specifically have to go to YouTube. But episode 1, I spoke a little bit about Tiffany Haddish. She was mispronounced some people's names on the Grammys, I believe it was. I'm sorry, not the Grammys, the Oscars a few years back. And I remember talking about that because a lot of people were making a big hoopla out of that. But going through some of these here, episode 3, I talk about Black Panther or Black Pride. Let's see some of my favorite episodes here. Ooh, episode 5. That was a good one. On episode 5, that really kind of took off. It was like one of my first episodes that really, kind of got a lot of headway. Not at the time, but like when I was kind of like in the teens or like early 20s, episode 5 kind of really took off because it was routine relationship. I'm sorry. It was Will Smith and other celebrities on relationships. And a lot of you were really interested in that and wanted to hear what that was about. Episode 7, I caught a lot of flack for because I said something really controversial about Tupac. But the title of the episode 7 is "Does Death Come Packaged with Immortality?" And the reason that was one of my favorite episodes was because I talked about a lot of rappers. It was a hip hop themed episode. And I think I spoke about other areas too, like politics and such, but I talked about how like we usually put people on a platform and make them better than they really were after they die because, you know, it's so ingrained within our culture to not speak ill of the dead. So, you know, we got to put them up on this huge, big platform. And I said some things about Tupac, y'all. So go and I'm not going to ruin it for y'all, but go and check that out. That's episode 7. Does death come packaged with immortality? Let's see what else we got here. Episode 9, The Weeknd says what we're scared to. I think I was talking about his EP that he dropped. That was that was one of my favorite ones. Episode 16 was pretty good. Meghan Markle was luckier than you. Some of these aged pretty well, some not so much. Let's see. I did one about the black church. See which one that was. See if I can't find that for y'all. But before I get to that, here's some other ones. Men versus mental health and therapy. Now, you all know how I feel about therapy, and the reason that was such a huge one for me was because it talked about how men should be going to go get therapy and why we feel like we can't. So that was a huge episode. And the few episodes that followed were the episodes of me talking about my first therapy session. So that was really cool. I had episode 24 was about interracial dating. That was fun. One of the more popular episodes I did was episode 26, titled "People in Open Relationships Are Happier Than You." And the reason that was one of my favorite episodes is because I had two people who are in open relationships on, and I interviewed them, and it was really, really powerful and very insightful. And I think they talk about a lot of things that a lot of people kind of sweep underneath the rug. So that was one of my favorite episodes. Again, people in open relationships are happier than you. That was episode 26. To this day, my most highly downloaded episode at over 150 downloads is episode 27. Single parent or step parent. Dating with kids is the new norm. I had two people who had kids. I want to say three maybe, but I had two people who had kids. I had one guy on who had kids and was dating, and I had another guy on who is dating someone with a kid. And that episode was really powerful because I think it talked about a lot of taboo topics. I think a lot of people have certain thoughts and opinions about dating people with kids, and the parent has a lot of thoughts and opinions that aren't oftentimes discussed. Like, we don't oftentimes hear these. So I posted it, and I had two people on, and it was great. And to this day, again, my most highly downloaded episode. That's episode 27. Single parent or step parent. Dating with kids is the new norm. Here we go. Episode 29 is the black church immune to criticism. That one was really, really, really good. Oh man. I know I sound biased, but I guess I got some of these numbers to prove it. Let's see here. Episode 32, I talked about homophobia, discrimination, and representation. That was fun. And I guess just to round this out, not just to keep you all, I don't want to make this too boring. One episode that really kind of changed the pace of the show was episode 40, just 10 episodes ago. So just 10 weeks ago. There was a lot happening in the country at the time with George Floyd, the city riots, and effective expression. And I wanted to talk about that. And that helped me almost kind of like reshape the podcast in a way to start talking about not necessarily just social issues that people struggle with on a daily, monthly, or yearly basis, but it kind of talked about the underbelly of society that most people don't want to talk about. And it was very relevant to what was going on in the now. It's one thing to talk about, the black church or, some celebrity or whatever that's going to be like temporary and go away. It's another thing to talk about what's going on in the community now, or with police brutality, with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these other people of color who have suffered in ways that none of us should really have to suffer in. So that was a big milestone for me. Not only was it episode 40, so it was huge anyway, it was big because it helped to re-identify the show a little bit. So that said, I'm gonna let you all go. But before I do, I just want to say thank you again. Thank you for everybody tuning in. Thank you for everybody watching, especially the audience on Periscope. I don't know what it was about this week, but the audience on Periscope has been very, very engaging. So I really appreciate you all. And as always, you all on Facebook, I really appreciate you watching and sticking around and tuning in. And John, I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the dialogue. Edgar, same thing. And hopefully we can do something special for episode 100 if and when we get there. Until the next time, everybody, as always, I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Take care.